Hello, this is part 2 to the Introduction to ICD 10 CM Diagnosis Coding, and in this recording I'm going to talk a little bit about your second book for this course, which is titled ICD 10 CM and ICD 10 PCS Coding Handbook 2018 Without Answers. Couple things. First off, you should have the 2018 book, because as I mentioned in the first part recording, there are close to 600 code changes for this year, and so that is all reflected in the 2018 book. I want you to know, as you're going through this course, for the most part, this book is where you're going to find your practice and where you are going to find your assignments within the exercises of each of the chapters. Okay, I will sprinkle in a few, if you will, other practice as I come across those, and other assignments besides this book, but for the majority of the work it comes from this textbook, thus you should have the 2018. Another first thing that I want to mention is something that students have brought to my attention, and that is the index at the back of this book. The index is an alphabetized topic listing, and sometimes if you're looking for a piece of information that you remember you read in a certain chapter or whatever, if you look back here at the index, that might be helpful in kind of pinpointing where that was. So do keep in mind your index as a tool when you're using this book. Okay, so commonly in E360 I refer to this book as the handbook or the AHA handbook, because the AHA is the one that organization that publishes this handbook. Our first learning plan, which I said spans the first 4 weeks of the course, actually covers chapters 1 through 7 in this book, as well as chapters 12 and 13 in this book are covered. Now, chapters 8 through 11 we skip because that refers to just PCS coding, procedure coding, and we do not do procedure coding in this course. So any reference to coding procedures in here, even in other chapters, we will skip over. You do not need to code the procedures. I am not going to talk about procedures. There is not time in this course to talk about procedures. So legitimate, valid resources for coding. Okay, there's all sorts of coding resources out there. Many private companies produce things and so on, but the official valid resources are going to be, number one, always the official coding guidelines. Okay, and that is it really. That is the official resource. Now I talked about that in the first part of the recording. Most common other resources to help interpret those guidelines are this coding handbook that's published every year. Okay, and what this handbook does is really further explain the official coding guidelines, because they're kind of written very cryptic. This helps explain how do you use them, what happens in a situation like this. Okay, another official resource, and you can actually see this on the front cover of your book, is the AHA Coding Clinic, and this is a formal publication by AHA which is published quarterly every year, so once a quarter every year. And what the Coding Clinic does is give further interpretation on guidelines where people have submitted questions to the groups that run the official coding guidelines. Okay, so far that's three: the official coding guidelines, this handbook, the coding clinic, which I will expand more upon in Learning Plan 1. And then lastly, if there's a coding situation, a diagnosis or procedure situation in which the official coding guidelines don't address it, this handbook doesn't address it, the coding clinic doesn't address it, a coding department within an institution, facility, will come up with their own department policy and procedure on how to code a certain situation, so that every coder in that organization is consistently coding that particular situation the same way. I'm going to give you an example now. Years and years ago, when arthroscopic or even laparoscopic procedures were first developed, first started, there were no codes for them because they were just beginning to take place. Some of them were considered testing procedures or experimental. So because there was no official guideline on how to report it, a department, let's say a university hospital, was starting these procedures, a coding department had to sit down and say, okay, how are we going to code this until we get official codes for it? So every coder in that department would code them the same way. So that's when department policies and procedures regarding coding come into play. Now the next thing I'm going to mention, everything I say here is important, but you're going to want to note this. This is going to be something that probably will show up in your first exam. There is what we call the four cooperating parties, and they are the parties that actually administer, maintain, establish, and write the coding guidelines. Who are these people? Who are these agencies, rather? There are four of them. And those four parties are American Hospital Association, CMS, Centers for Medical and Medicaid Services, National Centers for Health Statistics, and our own professional organization, AHIMA. Now I'm going to tell you, CMS oftentimes is very interested, most interested in the procedure coding because of payment for procedures. Okay, the National Center for Health Statistics is interested in everything, but for the most part more interested in diagnosis coding because they will track the occurrences of diseases, injuries, and so on. So taking a look at the handbook, if you turn to Roman numeral page 15, the section on how to use this handbook, please read through that. That is about 2 pages. If you look at the second page in that section, at the very first paragraph, the end of that first paragraph is a website for AHA's central office. That is where you can actually find the document spelled out of the official guidelines. Now, we reference this in your code book, but that was just a briefined version of the guidelines. Here you can find the complete guidelines. You can print it out, although it is quite lengthy, or maybe at least just favorite this website page to refer back to if you ever want to, or need to. But do read through the section how to use this handbook, and then after the Roman numeral pages we do move into the chapters. Chapter 1, the background of ICD-10, and this begins the first learning plan. So next I want to, in this recording, just summarize a few introduction things, and one of those things is the schedule that is posted in this course. Do print and follow that. That will go along with the lessons area in E360 to guide you through the course week to week through the semester. Additionally, I have weekly announcements and emails to highlight a few things for you. Um, and then as you look at the learning plan area in E360, you'll see that it's marked with the weeks and what the chapters are. We go through approximately, after the first learning plan, each week after that, beginning week 5, 2 body systems. And you'll see and can print out for each learning plan the learning plan document that can provide guidance throughout the specific learning plans. I do want to point out again that the handbook is where much of your practice and assignments will come from. For the most part, in each of the practice exercises in the chapters, the odd numbers, that is 1, 3, 5, 7, etc., are going to be for practice, and I provide you the answers in E360. And the even number problems in the exercises will, for the most part, be your assignments. You will note that on occasion, and there are some instances in the first learning plan where the entire exercise in the chapter is for practice and there is no scored problems. If there's one thing that I can emphasize for you before you begin, is that you do need to practice, practice, practice. Repetitiveness, just like if you remember that in med-term, is the key to learning. So do not go directly to your assignment and that's all that you complete. If you do that, you may or may not pass the course, but I promise you, you will not pass the RHIT exam if you do not do the practice and only do the assignments. As I can come across more practice for you to do, I am going to add that into E360. I will have a practice learning plan in which I will drop in additional practice. I'll label it by body system or chapter, so you can always go back and look, or if you're within a chapter looking for additional practice, you can see if there's any in there yet. But I will do that as we move through this semester and come across more things for practice for you. In addition, with the schedule, is you look at weeks 15 and 16. Week 15 is a time when you can start to study for the final exam in this course. The final exam is comprehensive for the whole course. Please know that I don't pick out the most difficult problems. You are able to use all your resources, and the final exam is week 16. Week 15 you can study, prepare for that. I also have an RHIT competency exam in which I've picked out coding problems that I think you should be able to answer at the end of the course and relate to what the RHIT exam looks like. Now, there are participation points for this, so if it's more than you can handle or understand, you at least get the participation points for that, as well as participation or extra credit points for the SMART eval when that comes up at the end of the semester. So, finally, in summary, weeks 1 through 4 is going to give you the basic understanding of coding, the different guidelines and conventions. You'll be able to look back at that as you move to individual body systems. The basic understanding of coding moves into each of the body systems, but as you go through each of the body systems, you will see and learn that each have some specific or unique guideline to them, whether it be infections or myocardial infarctions or deliveries. So you need that basic understanding and to be able to move into the individual body systems and those unique guidelines within. Please know if the lessons are open, you are welcome to work ahead as you have in other courses. Again, typically, as you recall from last semester, I usually correct after the due date. Sometimes I get in there a little bit early, but my only promise or commitment to you is within 2 to 3 days after the due date, oftentimes sooner. So let's start to work hard and learn about coding.